Contingency log number 96. Codename, Gothic Love. A while back, I ventured into the Avatar universe, making a contingency against one of the non-benders of the cast. In it, I covered Ty Lee, an acrobatic girl who knew how to combat benders without having the ability to bend as well. Being one of a team of 3 which was formed by the Princess of the Fire Nation, someone who was seen as a prodigy when it comes to firebending, and she would covet both the use of fear, but also preferring to surround herself with those she deems not just useful, but also powerful, which speaks volume when you take into account that when she decided to form her own team, she'd choose to have both of her companions be non-benders, someone who seemed to be the opposite of Ty Lee, someone who had a positive attitude to her surroundings and everyday life. The third in this trio of childhood friends would come in the form of the emotionally distant girl by the name of May. As stated, she was also a non-bender, one who was born to a family who took over Omashu, a city-state of which the Fire Nation would plunder when their king suddenly surrendered before any battle would be had. Though that would not be for long, but long enough for Azula to extend an offer to May, asking her to join her. Something that, unlike Ty Lee, she accepted without a moment of hesitation. She managed to bring her own form of combat along with her, not a form of close-ranged martial arts. But instead, she would implement the use of long-ranged weaponry. This comes in the form of various knife-like weapons which she had fashioned around her body, wrapped around several of her limbs, and hidden by the cloak she wears. But her use of these knives are surprisingly different than one would expect, as she doesn't seem to use them to directly hurt her opponents. At least that's not what we've seen, though given her personality, I wouldn't completely dismiss that she'd use them for more lethal attacks. That said, her main application of her weapons is to use them to subdue her opponents, choosing to pin them against hard surfaces through their clothing. The accuracy needed for these are impressive. Never mind that her knives are sharp enough to pierce directly through metal. But there is something else to this that I haven't mentioned until now. You see, not every opponent of hers is conveniently up against a solid surface for her to pin to. But even if you're not, she is capable of changing that. Sure, she does have some skill in hand to hang combat, sometimes knocking her opponents down before pinning them, but May is capable of throwing her knives hard enough that the force behind it can knock the average-sized individual off their feet. Something like this requiring a strength which one would not expect coming from her. If she'd chosen to use her knives for direct damage, the show would need a higher rating. May is an interesting case, not just for her method of combat, but on a psychological level, when asking Azula after meeting again if she'd come to end her existence. I have to wonder how much of that wasn't just a joke. We didn't get too much of her backstory, but we did learn that at a young age, she would be forced to control her emotions, as her parents believed that everything she'd done would be a reflection off the family as a whole. So she'd choose to not feel anything, always with a stern expression, always keeping to the sideline and never standing out. Years of this can have an effect on someone. Even when we'd first met her, she was more than willing to sacrifice her own brother. Was it perhaps because she was calling the bluff of her brother's kidnappers? Or was she truly emotionally detached enough that she held no attachment to her own family? I'd like to believe it was the former, as she would prove herself capable of caring for others, specifically her boyfriend, the prince at the time by the name of Zuko. Her love for him being enough that she would not just betray her own people to save him, but she would even prepare to fight, and possibly die, against Azula when confronted. To counter May, I need to be selective. Having something such as my cape pinned by her could prove a problem. Never mind that her knives and the force behind them could possibly puncture many of my Kevlar suits. That said, I do not need to get close to her to effectively combat against her own equipment. As while she has multiple different throwing knives, my equipment is far more versatile. That said, I've seen her do the right thing before, and I believe she could do it again for the right person. Which is why I have to get Zuko on my side, as he may be one of the only people who can get through to her should she cross a line. The more I delve into this universe, the more I watch as children get drawn into a war which started far before they were even alive. A harsh reality to conflict, as the innocent get caught in the crossfires, and the young are forced to grow up faster than they would otherwise. And I have yet to cover the ones who'd been affected the most during this story. But I will someday. If you also have a character you wish for me to cover, or just want to support this channel, I'll have a link to my Ko-fi page. There will also be a Google Doc with the list of characters who have ever been done or already commissioned by others.